Okay, so now that we have RBENV installed, we can use it to install the latest version of Ruby. So the first command I want us to execute is going to be RBENV, then a space install, and then after another space, we're going to put a flag here, which is going to be dash capital L, and I believe that is short for list. What this command is going to do is it's going to output all of the available versions of Ruby that RBENV can install. So if I scroll up all the way to the top of this output, you're going to start to see things like Ruby version 1.86. And that's actually a version of Ruby that's probably 8 or 9 years old, if I remember my history correctly. So that's sort of the beautiful part of RBENV is it allows you to install any and all of these versions, run them on the same computer, and be able to really easily switch between them in case you happen to be working on a project that is running Ruby 1.8.6. And then if you want to jump onto another project that's running on a totally different version of Ruby, like 2.7.1, you can totally do that as well. You can have all these installations on the same computer. They're not going to conflict with one another. You can even run different versions of Ruby based on the project or directory you're in. So you can get the terminal to automatically switch based on you navigating to one project directory or another. All of that is a little bit more on the advanced side, but it just goes to show you the power of this utility. So what we want to do is when we see this long list of numbers, we want to scroll down until we get to basically the end of it. You don't want to do something like move on to JRuby or any of these other things that appear below. These are all different variations of Ruby, different flavors. We want the core regular Ruby programming language, which is just going to have just the numbers output right here. And as you might know, with most things that are technological, the greater the version number, the more up-to-date that piece of technology is. So Ruby 3.0.4 is newer than Ruby 3.0.0, and Ruby 3.1.2 is newer than all of those things. Now, if you see something like -dev or -preview1, those are versions of Ruby that are still in development, and thus they're still prone to have some errors and things like that. So what I recommend you do is look for the greatest version number that you can identify that does not have dev or preview after it, and that's the version that you want to install. So for me, when I'm recording this video in July of 2022, the most up-to-date version is 3.1.2, which is what I'm going to install. Keep in mind, you do not have to install the exact same version as me. You can go ahead and download the latest and greatest version of Ruby you see, because I'd rather you be learning with the most up-to-date version of the language rather than taking a step back and keeping up with me and what I'm doing, right? So for me, I'm going to install this version. For you, look for the greatest version number you can identify and install that one. All right, so keep that number in mind. For me, it's going to be 3.1.2. And down below, we're going to go back to our terminal at the very bottom here. And I'm going to run RBENV install. And then, instead of providing the flag like last time, I'm going to write that version number. So right here, for me, it's going to be 3.1.2. Press enter, and that's going to start the process of asking RBENV to download that version and then build it from scratch and make it available on your operating system. You can actually see it fetching Ruby 3.1.2 for me from this location on the URL. So that just goes to show that the terminal is able to do basically all the regular things we do as a user on the computer or in the browser. It's just able to do them from this text-based application. All right. This process, as always, may take up to a few minutes. So I'm going to take a little breather here and check back in with you when Ruby 3.1.2 is installed for me. And then we'll close off the lesson by just double checking that everything was successfully installed. So I will see you in a few moments. Okay, so here we are at the end of the installation process. We can see that the output has told us that Ruby 3.1.2 was installed in this directory .rbenv/versions/3.1.2. And in case you're curious, this directory called versions is where RBENV will install all of your versions in Ruby. So they're all kind of self-contained within a single folder on your computer, which also makes it pretty easy to uninstall RBENV and all of its versions in case you ever want to do so. Now, because there are multiple versions of Ruby potentially capable of being installed on our computer, what I want to do here is run a specific command to tell RBENV to always run Ruby 3.1.2. Now, again, in the real world, this might not be what you want. You might want one project to run Ruby 2.7 and another project to run Ruby 3.1. But for us, since we're here for the purposes of learning, I'm going to stick with always having the most up-to-date version of Ruby on by default. And so I'm going to enable the terminal to always fall back to Ruby 3.1.2 whenever I run any Ruby-related commands. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to run rbenv, then a space and the word global. And what we're doing here is setting the global version of Ruby. The reason it's global is because it's the one that's always going to be present, always the one that's going to be run whenever we reference Ruby anywhere in our terminal. And so here I want to put the exact same version number as above, Ruby version 3.1.2 for me. Once again, if you downloaded a more up-to-date version, totally fine. Just replace these numbers with your version number. Execute this command. And then finally, the moment of truth has arrived. We want to double check that Ruby has been successfully installed and that it's now activated in our terminal. So what we can do here is run the command Ruby and then a space -v. That flag is short for version, and it should tell us the version of Ruby that is currently active in this terminal. So when I execute this command, you can see for me it says Ruby 3.1.2, and that's the exact version that I installed and the exact version that I made global. So if you see this, if you see the exact same version number output here, then congratulations, everything has been successfully installed. Ruby is available, we have the most up-to-date version, and now we're basically good to go. The only thing that remains is to install a text editor where we're going to actually be writing the code itself, but we'll talk more about that in the upcoming lesson. But that is it. That is the end of our installation process. Hopefully wasn't too crazy, and I will see you in the next lesson.